Hey, what's going on? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of Honest Conversations with Mo, the Mo Love Podcast. Wishing everybody out there, happy Valentine's Day. Yeah, want to go ahead and jump right on in with this episode. And this episode, I want to talk about. I'm gonna start off by talking about entitlement. Entitlement in the sense that sometimes we feel that there's things in life we feel like we deserve or um essentially entitled to happen for us or to us and things of that nature, where we feel like life is supposed to provide us this preferential treatment, um in which obviously it's not true in that life doesn't give us what we feel like we deserve. I think I've always talked about throughout, we always get what we need. We always get what we need. And then I think the thing with entitlement that becomes lost is we tend to lose our values, when we become entitled, when we feel like there's certain things that are supposed to happen for us, like for a day like today, for instance, when you look at Valentine's Day, you look at, oh, we feel entitled that we're supposed to end up being in a relationship or finding love, especially when you live like according to a certain timeline. You kind of feel like, oh, these certain things are supposed to happen to me by now. You began to become a bit lost and become you know a bit outside of yourself and outside of your values. And then that's where that sense of entitlement comes in. And then also entitlement in the sense of when we think about how things are supposed to progress for us in in our lives, in our careers, you know and it's just certain things are just supposed to happen, and it just doesn't go that way. And I think when we remember that we're we're not expected to get everything we feel like we deserve, we got to always remember the things we need. And recently for myself, I had to realize one thing about things, personally and professionally, I had to look at it in the sense of what is it that, I still need to learn from, this period of my life. Because, obviously everything's not going to be, the end all be all with things, in any, period or moment in our lives. But I think we got to also take the time to be honest with ourselves and know, like, what is it that we feel like we still need to take away from certain moments in our lives, before we you know are blessed with that next step. So I think it's important to know when we're becoming entitled, and also in the sense of knowing what entitlement looks like within us, when we feel like, oh, this doesn't align with my status, or I feel like it's beneath me. And you gotta remember, like, to be patient with yourself in that sense. And then also want to, dive into, control as well, in the sense of how we feel like we're supposed to be able to, control outcomes. And, I can own up to this for myself, where whereas a perfectionist, I feel like, all right, I'm supposed to, you know, I gotta be able to dictate things. I gotta be able to make certain things happen. And I gotta remember, sometimes I always gotta remind myself that I can't control everything. Like, it's also not up to me to control everything. I think we gotta remember that as well. So when we get lost in control, and we get lost in trying to expect the perfect outcome to navigate things according to a certain time frame. This is supposed to happen in this manner, and that's just I mean, we know it. It's just not how life goes. And I think when we remember that life is life is a series of waves, and whether emotional, whether moments and things of that nature, you just gotta be willing to ride the wave. And I think when we try to control and dictate things, we become lost and further try to, you know, whether it's manipulating, outcomes to, occur a certain way, or also, manipulating people. And that's when we tend to realize why the things we, you know, feel like aren't going the way they want is because that sense of control and feeling as we, need to dictate the outcome of things. And I think it's important to realize when we're when you're also looking at control and thinking about how am I how is this, even making me better? Is it even making me better? Is it going, in the manner that I want it to go? And I think when we get lost in, expecting certain outcomes, we get lost in who we are. And then that leads to the next part of this, just in terms of, paranoia of, oh, why did this person do that to me? And I think we begin to hold grudges against others, hold grudges against ourselves, and we get lost in who we really are as a person. And I think when we look at that sense of entitlement, that sense of control, and that sense of paranoia, we forget we forget to give ourselves grace in those certain periods, where we got to remember, hey, it's not expected to happen for me. That's entitlement. And I can control this. That's that sense of control. And paranoia is just knowing, hey, it's gonna happen when it happens, and not feeling like, oh, woe is me, and feeling like, why are these things happening for me? And I think we just gotta remember and be patient with ourselves. And I think that's when we sometimes get lost, is when we aren't patient with ourselves. When we forget to be patient with ourselves, we forget ourselves like wholeheartedly. We just forget who we are, who we're becoming, who we're growing into be. And I think that's the hard part of navigating, these different emotions, these different waves, these, different experiences for our lives. And how do we, get better is by being patient, by being willing to let things just naturally happen, naturally flow, and just also, come to terms with things. And I think whether that's the end of things, the end of a situation, whether it's a relationship, personal connection, professionally, it's just what also coming to terms with those things. And I think when we become honest with ourselves, we remember that we can't allow our beings to be dictated by entitlement, control, and paranoia, because that only further hurts us and further beats us down into a person that we really don't want to be. And I think, as I've talked throughout this season, it's just knowing who we want to be and knowing who we want to become is so important, because when when we feel like we have to dictate everything and try to force outcomes, it doesn't lead to how how things are really supposed to go for us. Because when you remember to be patient, when you remember to you know take take those necessary risks when obviously they present themselves accordingly, it, and knowing, hey, it's not going to go a certain manner, and not expecting, having those outright expectations for what's supposed to happen, what's supposed to occur, it's just only going to help us, get better and figure out more of ourselves. Because when we figure out more of ourselves, we become better versions of ourselves. And I think that's the most important thing. When you look at all those, three elements, because honestly, all those three elements can ultimately ruin us, because, we get caught up in our egos, we get caught up in our pride, and we end up not only hurting ourselves, we end up hurting others, we end up hurting who we feel like we need to be, because we just feel like we got to, dictate outcomes and dictate the situation. And when you feel like you got to dictate the situation, you get lost in the sauce, literally, and you forget, who you are, honestly. And that also ultimately leads to that sense of, that sense of, isolation from the world, isolation from ourselves, where we forget, like, hey, this thing isn't just gonna, happen for us or happen to us. it's going to take time. It's going to require a bit of patience, and it's going to require us to be genuine with ourselves. And I think when we remember that, life is about connections, life is about, you know, that sense of just being in the moment and being who we feel like uh who we feel like, we can trust. And I think it's important to, build that sense of trust. And I think that jumps into the next topic of, with trust comes, flirting with integrity. I want to, you know, explain flirting with integrity in the sense that when flirting with integrity looks like obviously staying true to who you are first and foremost, and understanding, your boundaries, understanding what it is and being authentic to yourself. And I think that's the most important thing when it comes to flirting with integrity is knowing, hey, I'm always going to be myself, uh, regardless of the outcome, regardless of what happens, and I'm always going to be genuine, to who I am and to who I'm being, because it's so important that we become this person that is true to who we are and who we're being. That we remember that it's just how we grow. It's just how we feel like we're evolving. How we're becoming this person that we want to be. Because when you're honest with your intentions, whether your intentions of how you want to see your career advance, how you want to see, you know, your your family, how you want to see a relationship kind of evolve and kind of mature and kind of what you actually want out of these things. I think it's really truly fun with integrity because as I said, you're being honest with who you are, who you're becoming. And when we forget who we're becoming, we're not, aligning to, that sense of integrity and kind of what we need out of ourselves. And I think also being, not only flirting with integrity not only kind of opens up that sense of trust within ourselves, it naturally just attracts the right people in our lives. And I think that's the most important thing that kind of, we all want is, we just want to continue to attract the right people in our lives. And it's going to attract the right opportunity when you are continuously authentically yourself and not feeling like you're, you know, um, acting or putting on performances and not in alignment with who you are. And I think when we are in true alignment with who we are, just naturally attracts the right people, and attracts the people that are meant for us, in the long term. And as we continue grow and evolve as beings, it's just going to continue to attract the right people for the right moments in our lives. And that that outcome that you felt like you had to control, you know, and when you naturally, are patient with yourself, you know, that right job opportunity from a person you might have, just connected with could, blossom. Or you, oh, what was me, I can't, let's say you feel like, oh, what was me, you can't find love and things of that nature. And when you suddenly let go of that false, yeah, how you speak to yourself, and that false belief, and knowing, obviously knowing love is attainable and love is possible for yourself, begin to realize, oh, now you get to see who naturally, is meant for you, who you naturally attract, and who you really truly, build you know a strong, foundation, and a healthy, relationship overall with the person. And also, just when it comes to yourself too, how are you building, attracting the right things for yourself, and, feeding yourself and fueling yourself to get better, to be better. I think that's the most important thing when it comes to, flirting with integrity. And how do we, kind of grow and evolve and become this version of ourselves that we know is possible and is very, capable. But we just gotta trust in the moments, trust in what's meant for us to attract, what's meant to enter to our lives. And, I kind of want to reiterate, kind of want to go back, like, we always get what we need. We don't get what we deserve. And I think when we remember that and come to terms with where we are, with what we've been getting from that, you know, in terms of what I think, honestly, trying to say what we're getting from that moment of what we need is important and vital. And, being honest with ourselves. And it only allows us to accept ourselves in that moment, and whatever, comes next for us, what we need next, it's just going to naturally blossom. And then also in the sense of it'll just bring that inner peace. And I think that's what we all need. We all need that sense of inner peace. We all need the that healthy belief in ourselves to be, content with where we are, because it's easy to be fueled by, entitlement. It's easy to be fueled by wanting to control outcomes. It's easy to be, paranoid and feel like, oh, life's not going how I want it to go. It's so easy, but when we have that inner peace with ourselves, man, it's an incredible feeling. And I think we gotta always remember, like, how are we going about finding that inner peace with ourselves, and what aligns with who we are. And then now I want to jump into, of course, we just recently had the Super Bowl between, the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots, Super Bowl 60 in San Francisco. Wow. Wasn't much of a game in the sense of, obviously, the Seahawks dominated the Pats throughout. I wasn't expecting that. I definitely did call that game in terms of the Seahawks winning, and I knew obviously it was going to come down to the run games. And Kenneth Walker obviously came out with Super Bowl MVP, but I mean both defenses were dominant. I just think what hurt the Pats the most was their lack of um obviously their lack of being able to keep Drake May upright. But yeah, they O line, especially they left side. Was Campbell, the rookie, he just struggled all night, gave up 14 pressures. It just showed, they weren't able to get something consistent offensively going, that hurt them throughout the game. And as I said, their run game couldn't get going. But their defense placed out. Obviously, it was 9-0 at halftime, 12-0 going into the fourth quarter. So I mean, they had chances, but I mean, Seahawks, just came out on top and, won the Super Bowl, and now, obviously Super Bowl 60 champions. And I mean, they are formidable, so we'll see if they'll be able to, repeat next year, but we shall see. It's gonna be tough, but congrats to the Seahawks. Congrats to, those fans, the 12 million fans out there in Seattle, and worldwide out there too. But yeah, they did it, they pulled it out. And then shout out to Bad Bunny. What an incredible, halftime performance that he had. That was an incredible show that he put together, from the storytelling of, where he comes from Puerto Rico to how not only just but how he visually, told that story as well, incorporating real businesses, incorporating, real traditions. Obviously, yeah, there was a real engagement. There was, the wedding, and then the after party, and then just overall telling a real story. His messaging throughout was incredible, incredible performance. Obviously, it's always pushback, but that we heard. Just in terms of his level of artistry, and obviously people were saying they weren't able to understand what he was actually saying, of course. But regardless, I think he had an incredible performance, an incredible show that he put on. And also the commercials, the AI and everything, it wasn't really hitting like that this year. But yeah, the commercials didn't hit like that. But it was a pretty dope Super Bowl regardless. Outside of the game. It wasn't really, much of a game, but they, uh, But yeah, shout out to the Seahawks and shout out to Bad Bunny for for killing it. And again, with that performance, what an incredible performance. Definitely the performance topped the game for sure. And then next, we get into, unrivaled currently, the one-on-one tournament is going on. Uh we got we got Chelsea Gray versus Alicia Gray in the finals right now. I'm currently watching it as we speak. But it's been an incredible, unrivaled one-on-one tournament. Sadly, my girl, Paige Beckers lost to Chelsea Gray in that matchup. Also, who I was also rooting for, Shakira Austin, also lost in that matchup. But I mean, Alicia and Chelsea ball throughout, the tournament. A little while ago, Chelsea, beat Kelsey Plum, her former teammate, and then Alicia Gray just beat, Aaliyah Boston to get, to the finals. Yeah, unrivaled 1-1 tournament. I love it. We'll see who comes out with I'll say, is it 200K cash prize? Forget the grand total of the cash prize, but yeah. My pick is as it currently looks, not based off it currently looks, but I am rooting for Alicia Gray. But the point guard, she is the point guard, so we shall see. She might pull it off regardless. And live score update, it is tied, but yeah, shout out to what's been an incredible, unrivaled one-on-one tournament. They continue to, go above and beyond as they, kind of from their presentation to everything when it comes to unrivaled has been a match. And they continue to do that even, with the one-on-one tournament. Even, announced the news that the Unrivaled will have a stop, in the Barclays Center, in March. So Unrivaled continues to grow and continues to evolve, and it's obviously has shown throughout this iteration, and obviously this incredible one-on-one tournament that's been going on these past couple of days, this past weekend for sure. And then I want to get into next the NBA trade deadline in NBA All Star Weekend briefly. With All Star Weekend, just obviously, the new format. It's gonna be interesting how that goes. The USA versus the world, three teams. But yeah, that should be fun. All Star Weekend, Saturday night hasn't, necessarily been the same, but we'll see how that goes as well. But it should be fun as well. So it comes out, 3-point contest and dunk contest. But jumping back into, the NBA trade deadline, what obviously it wasn't the moves we expected, but what a whirlwind of moves that did occur. Obviously the biggest definitely had to be James Harden to the Cavs. And obviously the only moves the Lakers made was, getting Luke Kennard, but we needed an Uber. And Uber is definitely a shooter, guys, and that's what the Lakers needed. We'll see. Obviously, he's he's been solid in his, stints thus far in his first couple games as a Laker there. What was another major move? Oh, Jerry Jackson to the Jazz, and then the Jazz got fined for tanking because they were sitting out, Jerry Jackson Jr. and Lloyd Markkinen, essentially starters in the fourth quarter. And then obviously we just got news of uh, Jerry Jackson Jr. Being out for the season for growth in his knee that needed to be repaired. There. Um, who else? What else was a major trade that really stood out? Obviously, Chris Paul getting traded and lead to his subsequent retirement, which I forgot. I thought he got cut, and then I find out he was never cut, and he got traded to Toronto, and Toronto had just waived him yesterday, and he just retired. Announced his retirement. But shout out to him there. But I'm trying to think like other major moves when it came to the trade deadline. And it's really, I mean, the Bulls, traded pretty much everybody. Vooch is in Boston, and I hated that move. Only makes the Celtics better, and we hate that here. Kobe White is in Charlotte. I do like that move for them. Ayo Dosunmu is in Minnesota. That was a good pickup there. Uh, Jared McCain went to Thunder. I thought that was a sneaky pickup there for them. Who else made like a solid move? Obviously, we didn't see the major moves. Oh, outside the major move of AD getting traded to the Wizards, that was huge there. and we shall see. Obviously, I think he might be done for this season, but we shall see there on that one. And then who else? Obviously, yeah, we didn't get the Giannis trade. We didn't get the Giannis trade that we thought we would see, but I expect that not to happen. I didn't expect those guys to get moved right now at this point. So not not shocking there on those. But yeah, there's a lot of moves. There's other other like smaller moves I'm trying to think of that really like stood out, but then not it was a very like I'll say in terms of like usual trade deadlines, it was a good bit of moves, but it was like a lot of teams just retool. Obviously, we know like when it comes to like the second apron, how teams are trying to get off a lot of salaries and things of that nature. And I think a lot of teams were prepping for this off season. Opening up a lot of cap space coming into this next free agency market, which I don't see a ton of major players out there. Obviously, I think a lot of teams are going to go all in for a guy like Giannis. Teams go for John, things of that nature. But we shall see. We shall see there. But yeah, it was a I'd say outside of the James Harden trade and the AD trade, it was kind of like a subdued, trade deadline this year. So, um, and then lastly, of course, want to get into top four and starting off with favorite album, and probably the only album I've been listening to since it dropped is been The Fall Off by J. Cole. And what an impeccable what an impeccable run has definitely been for Cole. Just with the fall off and how he was able to, essentially close out his story with this double album. And I can't decide which disc I love the most, disc 29 or disc 39. I think I honestly I got to say I think it's disc 29 right now in this moment. It's disc 29 only because a lot of that side of that first part of the album double album is just that first disc is just all the songs that hit, it just hits. It was definitely no skips there for me. um from starting off, obviously from the intro, it was this, gone back to Carol, that intro with James Taylor sampling that to uh 2-6 to Runaway, goes into Poor Things, their legacy, then Bus Road Blues. Then Bus Road Blues leads to Who the Fuck Is You? That goes into the story, going into, drum and back bass. Then the Let Out. Come on, guys. The Let Out. I can't even pick which is my favorite song from that side of the album. But then the Let Out, then you got Bombs in the Ville slash Hit the Gas. Second half of Hit the Gas. Oh my gosh, what a tale that is so impeccable. Just the thought to kind of I think it kind of speaks to how sometimes we are so hard on ourselves, and I can definitely relate to that, where we feel like, oh, we aren't where we're supposed to be. And I think obviously it goes back to that sense of entitlement. um and we feel like when we actually look into where we are in this present moment and look back at ourselves, and see like, hey, we should be proud of ourselves in these moments. And, just him being, proud of himself and, being able to, say, with his two kids and, could say, did you make a mistake? Obviously, he didn't in that sense. Then Lonely at the Top, impeccable. Just that storytelling of, oh man, at least storytelling throughout the album. But yeah, Lonely at the Top and storytelling of how, wanted to, be like his idols and potentially, if he could, help them reignite, that fire that they have and that spark. But essentially that realization that, this is a natural progression with, what ends up happening, to all of us is that, we obviously, tend to move on from things. And and that level of excitement obviously isn't there as we continue to grow and evolve in our, our own, those next set of aspirations that we have for ourselves, that we're trying to build in our lives. And yeah, that first half, the story of, his love for the city of Fayetteville to, he talking about not only love for music, but his relationship, you know, um, with his wife, and then obviously, so yeah, just those three core elements, that encompass him. And then this 39, it was solid, but I feel honestly, I feel like I think that's gonna be the part of the album that I'm gonna have to, go back to, later on. In the sense of it was obviously the storytelling, and once again was impeccable. But I think that because this 29 obviously from age 29 when he back to the Ville, when he was at his, peak of his powers, and he felt like, you know, he saw his city, in a different light. He saw who he was in a different light. His relationship and things of that nature, and his love for music in a different way. And then this 39's, that acceptance of, letting fame go, coming, to accept himself for who he is. As, it evolved, then, the things that mattered to him, once again, going back to, his city, the music, his family, love overall, how you know, he felt like he didn't have to be something he wasn't, and I think that was the most important thing. And, once again, it goes back to, flirting with integrity. Yeah, at his core, he always, stay true to himself. But yeah, this 39, definitely have to go back to where obviously the outstanding, tracks from that side for sure is definitely what is it? Um wow, I'm blanking on that side, but the Villas, Old Dog, Life Sentence is impeccable. Like I said, I feel like that's a track I'll have to go back to when I feel like, when I'm blessed to, have that, that love in my life. When it comes to, that. But I also think also Life Sentence not only just talking about love in that sense, you know, he's literally obviously talking about, someone that holds you down. But I think he also talks about, the friendships and connections too, even though he's, necessarily, speaking, in regards to, his now wife. But just Life Sentence overall, yeah, definitely something I'll have to go back to. Only You was beautiful. And once again, another track that I feel like I have to come back to once, I'm blessed, in that phase of my life later on. But right now in this moment, still impeccable. Just listening to it, definitely relate to Burna Boy's verse for sure. In that sense of, how does love look, at that current moment, you know, when it's only yourself, and you kind of want to ensure like, hey, is this person, actually, want me for me, and do I actually want them for them? I think that's the most important thing too. And Man Up Above, and his, love for hip hop, and I Love Her Again. We, finding that love again, for sure. What If and Quick Stop, and The Whole World is a Ville, and Ocean Ways. But definitely, this 29 over this 39 for me in this present moment, it's definitely something I have to go back to. Um, but now, like I said, I love this album. Definitely reignited my joy to even, get back to writing. So I've been getting back into that. It's been fun to get back into, my own writing exercises. Getting back to like journaling, having that, that fun, and enjoying, that creative process once again for myself, has been exhilarating, has been exciting, and it's been a, focal point for myself this year, as I talked about, that importance of finding my joy again with the things that I really, really love. And then, next favorite show to watch currently, I've been watching this show called Younger from, I think, like from 2015 to like 2021. Essentially, the story of where Liza Miller is a 41-year-old, but she pretends to be 26 because, she feels like at that current point in her life, she was a divorcee, single mom, and, her profession of, that she loves, publishing and books. That she couldn't find a role because, she felt like, the industry had aged her out. And she had to, pretend to act younger, and, keep her from the people that, she cared about. So it's been an interesting show thus far. How we kind of look at, our not only who we feel like it's interesting. It goes back to, kind of how we feel like who we need to be at times just to ensure, we fit a certain role. But at our core, we feel like, hey, this isn't who we really are. At the same time, I think she does a great job of still trying to be herself. She just lied about, being 26, which I mean is funny. Now it's been a dope show. What, season 5 this far? Yeah, it's been a great watch thus far. Really enjoyed it. Uh, what do I have currently going on? Currently going on, like I said, I've been getting back in journaling. Like I said, I appreciate the fall offer coming out, and inspiring that love for getting back into writing and getting back into that creative process as I mentioned, and then just I think as I spoke to earlier, being patient with myself with what I need in this present moment is kind of what I've been going on and coming to accept that and where I am at. And then what I'm looking forward to is kind of, just, what ends up being next, with everything from, what I'm learning from, what I currently need now to what ends up happening next. Obviously, excited to, continue writing and seeing, where those pieces take me, where those thoughts take me there. And the trips, and just all the blessings that come in the next few weeks, next few months, and so on and so forth. But yeah, definitely, appreciate you all as always for listening to another episode, and listening, to my rambles as always. But as always, until next time, always appreciate y'all. But peace.